Hey folks, Kevin Inoue here with QTube from Flight Designer LLC, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about 3D printing today. So, I'm sure if you follow the news about firearm stuff at all, you've seen all the hubbub about ghost guns and 3D printed guns, and you know what? This is not what that's about. I'm not talking about 3D printing real firearms. That's just not where my interest is, and I don't think that I'd trust anything that I 3D printed with actual live rounds anyway. So what I'm talking about is specifically for props use. And I had an earlier post on this, and I shared some things that I printed, some dummy rounds, things like that, some fake EOTech sites that I'm very happy with. I think they turned out all right. The client seemed happy with them on that rental gig. But you know, there's a steep learning curve, and there's some things that work and some things that don't. I am not a 3D designer, so most of what I'm doing is either buying designs on Etsy or finding them on Thingiverse or things like that. And so I am a little bit subject to what other people are willing to share and how well that works, and then kind of putzing around and just figuring out the settings that work best. Now, one of the first prop guns I tried was the wheel lock from CarneyRex on Etsy. And I was told PETG would be the stronger material. I had a lot of problems with that, where I would start, go fine for a while, but then it would start to kind of like spaghetti and make a mess. Also sometimes warping, so that it wasn't really flat on the end. I've had that issue with some things where it starts to peel away from the bed, and what should be a flat edge is not anymore. I have found that by far PLA Plus is the most easy material for me to work with. Better than ABS, better than PETG. And there's regular PLA, there's PLA Plus. I don't know exactly how different they are in strength and things. I do like that at least some of these are a little bit more earth-friendly. They're largely organic materials that are used to make them. That's a bonus in my book, things like that. So what kind of stuff can you make? Well, I'm gonna start with a couple of things that I thought worked okay, and then some things that didn't work okay. Training guns. So, buying things from ASP or Blue Guns can be a little pricey. I don't want to pay $70 for a blue or red copy of a firearm to train for a workshop. And they don't always have the things that I want anyway. So I figured, well, let's see what I've got there. So I found some stuff on Thingiverse, and this is a training copy of a Springfield Hellcat that matches one that I actually won in a contest. It's okay. I think what they did was they did a scan using their phone and just kind of did a 3D scan that way and dropped that straight in. So this was not designed to be a training gun or a holster model or any of the other things that sometimes the ones you buy online are. So I did do things like connect the trigger to the trigger guard to make it a little bit stronger, just with some liquid nails. I also ended up covering the whole thing in epoxy clear coat, just to make it a little bit more durable, and still slightly tacky after a while. I probably need to sand that down some more or something. And if I want to be able to put something on the rail, like stick one of my O lights or something on there, I'll need to clear that out a little bit because it got a little gunked up when I did the epoxy coat. But if I just want a fairly lightweight, medium durable, non-moving version, obviously I could have printed this in black or silver or some other color as well. But I've been doing enough workshops that it seemed like maybe having some more obvious training replicas was the way to go. And I just did a black paint wash over before the epoxy just to help the line stand out a little bit more. One of the biggest problems with this model was actually getting it out from the supporting material. So I'll drop a picture in here. You can see what it looked like as it printed, because anything that overhangs, you can't just print in midair. You drop the filament, it'll just fall. It's like pancake batter. It's got to land on something. So they create these sort of scaffoldings as you go. But then one of the challenges can be, how do you get it what you want away from what you don't want, and pick off the waste bits without breaking the actual bit. And that was a real challenge on this one. I had a hard time, and I did end up at least cracking the trigger guard in one place trying to do that. Here's an example of a piece that was starting to print when the printer clogged. But you can see this is the support material is more like lines or a screen, whereas the stuff that they want you to keep is going to be whatever percentage of infill you tell it to do. So there is a difference between what's meant to be solid and what's meant to be snapped away. But it's hard, and I have cut myself on jagged bits trying to break some of the stuff off before. It can be a little tricky. And if you overdo it, if you try and just like Dremel it away or something, these things are not solid on the inside. They have, you could print them solid on the inside, but it would take forever and use a lot of plastic. usually what we do is there's a sort of a lattice or a hex pattern or something like that, triangles on the inside that are filled in to help give it some structural integrity and support and rigidity, but without taking forever and using quite as much plastic, so it's not a solid piece. That means you can't just grind or cut or sand and have it be solid in the middle the way you would if you had molded it. So that does make modifying things a little bit harder sometimes, or cleaning them up. I still need to do a little cleaning up on this. There was something with the connection between the trigger and the wheel lock mechanism that didn't quite get right. But this is the flintlock, or not flintlock, sorry, the wheel lock from CarneyRex, and I broke like 3 or 4 springs trying to get it to where I could click this in just right. And I'm still not sure I've got it. The idea being that you should be able to wind this up with the key, place the flint against it, pull the trigger, and it'll turn the wheel. Now that's not a very visible motion, so I'm not too worried about that for props use, if that actually works. This is made to be a Nerf gun, and it can actually, I just powered with some rubber bands, it can actually launch Nerf darts. I don't have one down here right now. Let's see if it'll launch a Sharpie. Yes, it will. So yes, this can launch things. So one of the things I've wondered about is a little bit of wadding and then like some of the arrowroot powder or something to make a little cloud of smoke. That seems like it could be doable for a Three Musketeers kind of thing. And this came with a couple of different options in terms of barrel length. You could get a stubby one or a longer one. I couldn't print the longer version of the forearm stock, the forward stock, on my printer. My printer just wasn't big enough to be able to do that. Didn't have a long enough bed. So this is kind of a hybrid. It's a slightly longer barrel, but not the longer stock. And then the shoulder stock, you could also do, there was a sort of a pistol grip option if you wanted it to be more of a handgun. There's a little belt clip that's, again, I need to redo this. I haven't screwed it in all the way. So that it could just be carried on a belt, although I don't know how much I'd trust this plastic. So far, the only thing on that is broken repeatedly while trying to print it has been the spring. And you know, this is the main part of it, but there's a little loop that sticks out. So this is one of the ones that broke. And you can see it's got a decent amount of give to it. It does have some proper springiness, but if it gets too thin, or doesn't have enough infill, or the wrong material or whatever, it can snap if it's pushed a little too much. This is mostly painted. The silver is not painted. This is just the silver filament, in part because I wanted to be able to keep it to where I could adjust things still, and I didn't want to prevent parts from being able to move against each other. And you can see where the paint's getting scraped away on this, but it actually kind of works as like stained wood versus the unstained wood, where the ramrod gets rubbed. How sturdy is this? I don't know. I mean, if you drop it, there's a decent chance it might chip somewhere. The same thing that's true with any of our resin or plastic props. It's not like a hard rubber or a soft rubber. It's not going to tear like soft rubber, but it's not as durable as the hard rubber in general. And certainly parts like this, if it's dropped on it, they could break. Oh, I guess the screw is another part that broke once or twice. This is one of the few ones that's actually a printed screw rather than a bought metal screw, just because it's somewhat decorative and an odd piece. And so because I was trying to over tighten it to make the flint stay in there, it snapped off the first time. So I ended up cheating and just kind of gluing that all together rather than having to crank it down to make that stay. So I consider that one a relative success. There are some things where just when you actually look at the model, it's scaled down, and there's, to me, some guesswork in trying to figure out, well, what size should that be? How big do I print it? Can I print it in multiple parts and glue them together or not? Maybe. There's some things that, like, this was one that was meant to be a training replica gun that I started. And you know, it's got some level of functionality. Eventually, it's made to be able to chamber dummy rounds and eject them, things like that. Well, actually, not eject them, but put them in the magazine, feed them out there. But this is proportioned a lot like a real firearm, and as such, the things like the walls of the magazine, for example, are just way too thin, and so they just break so easily. That I don't see this as really a viable print for me. And frankly, I'm not sure what it could do that an airsoft couldn't. I think for the most part, you're going to be better off just buying an airsoft gun that's got some of those levels of functionality. And if you want to demonstrate what a magazine does, just get a magazine, you know, buy one of the clear ones, see inside it, see how the whole Pez dispenser thing works. The next one that I wanted to try, just started printing parts for this, haven't done all of them yet, but this is a shell ejecting lever action shotgun. the Steiner model. And this one, I still haven't snapped off some of the support bits that I need to be able to fit them together. I'm a little worried about things like the fragility of those sidewalls. But it looks like it could be a pretty cool model when it all comes together. And there's examples of all of these on YouTube, things like that. Most of them use a mix of metal screws and bolts, and some metal springs, as well as sometimes printed springs like this. I think this is the magazine tube spring. But it can also be helpful just to buy an assortment of compression springs. That's probably the cheapest way to go, find what works. So, you know, it's not a magic solution to everything. It's not like I can just say, find me one of these, print it, and the next day have one ready to go. These models do generally require at least some cleanup, some sanding, some deburring. You gotta get all the extra bits away. They definitely benefit from some painting. They may or may not need some sealing afterwards, so like the epoxy coat or something like that to help keep them in place. And some of them are pretty darn complex in terms of how to put them together. So it's, you know, it's not a perfect solution, but I think it's an interesting option. I think it's a useful tool to have in your arsenal. I've got I just replaced the nozzle and Bowden tube in mine because it got gunked up and blocked up, and it was a fairly cheap and easy upgrade to do. So after having been relatively quiet for the last couple of weeks, it is now buzzing away again. And we'll see how it goes. So what I'm using is this CR10 Mini that I bought off eBay. And right now I've got some PLA Plus in there, printing a dummy casing to go with that Steiner. And this is a nice small project to test the new nozzle that I put on, a new Bowden tube, because I had to replace all that stuff. The good news is, it seems to be working all right. You can see that sort of lattice work inside where it's, I think this is like 20% infill. It's got those kind of diamond shapes just to give it a little rigidity, so it's not completely hollow and likely to break. Hopefully that answers some of your questions if anybody's been interested in using 3D printers to create prop guns for theater or film. I've got some other stuff I want to share soon, so stay tuned, hit like, subscribe, whatever, ask questions. I'm here for now, until I'm not.